Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to Hahmat HaHodesh, our monthly exploration of Jewish time, wisdom, and practice. I am your host, Yosef Lopez, and today we enter Marheshwan, a month that may seem unremarkable at first glance, yet reveals profound wisdom about the nature of sacred time itself. After the spiritual intensity of Tishrei, with its succession of festivals and solemn observances, Marheshwan arrives like a quiet exhale. No holidays punctuate its 30 days, no special prayers or ritual objects mark its passing. And yet, this very ordinariness invites us into a different kind of sacred work, the work of finding holiness in the everyday, of sustaining spiritual consciousness without the scaffolding of festival observance. Before we explore the month's themes, we must address a common error that distorts our understanding from the outset. Many people today refer to this month as Heshvan, just Heshvan, but this is incorrect. It would be like our calling our current month of October just Tober instead of its full name. The proper name is Marheshwan, and understanding why deeply matters. The name Marheshwan comes from the Akkadian warah, which literally means 8th month. Warah, month, samnu, 8th. It is the 8th month counting from Nisan, just as we are commanded in the Torah, as we have covered in previous episodes. Now, why do people drop the Mar and call it Heshvan instead of Marheshwan? It's because they mistakenly associate Mar with this Akkadian word Mar with the Hebrew word Mar, meaning bitter. Since the month has no festivals and was traditionally seen as somewhat austere, a folk belief arose that calling it Marheshwan would be inauspicious, as if we were declaring it a bitter month. So people began dropping Mar in an attempt to sweeten it, engaging in a kind of magical thinking to avoid bad fortune. But this is doubly mistaken. First, linguistically, Mar and Marheshwan has nothing to do with the Hebrew word for bitter. It's the result of fascinating phonological changes. The name evolved from the Akkadian or Samnu through different linguistic adaptations. The result? In the modern Hebrew form of Marheshwan or Marheshvan, the connection to the original Akkadian root orach, meaning moon, similar to our Hebrew word yerach, or month, and shamnu, meaning 8, a cognate of our word shmoneh, is no longer apparent to most speakers. And so the first two letters, mar, have been popularly reinterpreted as the Hebrew word for bitter. Some have even suggested alternate readings, that mar is related to matar, which is like droplets, like associating the month with the rainy season that begins now. Now, these folk etymologies are creative, even very poetic, but they're not the word's actual origin. Second, and most importantly, we do not manipulate reality by avoiding words. The month is what it is. No festival, yes. But as we'll explore, that's precisely what makes it profound. To truncate its name out of superstition is to miss out on an entire message. But the month carries another name as well, one even more ancient. In the first book of Kings, when Solomon completes the temple, the text ובשנה 11 בירח בו הוא החודש השמיני קלה הבית לכל דבריו לכל משפטיו וינהו 7 שנים. In the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, the house was finished in all its parts and according to all its specifications. He built it in 7 years. So, Bul, Beth, or Wow, Lamed, is the biblical name for the month that's mentioned here. So what does it mean? Here we find ourselves in the richness of interpretive tradition. In the Targum Yonatan, and by the way, in a previous episode, I mistakenly said that the Targum, all Targum was written by Ankelos. That is true, but only of the Torah. There are different Targumim. There's the Targum Yerushalmi, there's the Targum Yonatan, there's the Targum Ankelos, and Nifititi, and all different types. But they're all what they have in common is that they're all an Aramaic translation of the Mikra. So the Targum Yonatan, the Targum that we're using for the prophets, is a Aramaic translation composed by Yonatan ben Uziel, who was one of the foremost students of Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the Elder. He translates the verses of the Nevi'im, incorporating prophetic traditions transmitted to him from Malachi, Zechariah, and Haggai, who are the end of the prophets. So he renders the verse as follows. ובשעתה חדה עשרה בירח מסף אביהו ירח תמינה. So that is to say, in the 11th year, in the month of Masafavia, B'yarach Masafavia, that is the month of gathering the produce. And when it says Hu Yarach Temina, that is the 8th month. So the Targum understands Bul as the month of gathering, when the last fruits and grains are brought in from the fields before winter's arrival. Just as Elul started off the month of ingathering, and Tishrei that celebrates the actual harvest, this last month before the actual winter represents the last bits of gathering everything in from the field. Right? The last fruits and grains are brought in from the fields before winter's final arrival. It's a month of transition, of completion, of drawing resources inward. But the Radak, or David Kimchi, offers us multiple layers of meaning in his commentary on this verse. B'yerach bul hu Marheshwan. In the month of Bul, that is Marheshwan, as it says, in the 8th month. We know that Marheshwan is the 8th month, so that we know that Bul is referring to the one that we now call Marheshwan. And it is called this Bul because of the rains that began in it. Right? Inyan Mabul. It's related, or it's related to flood. Mabul. The word for flood in Hebrew is Mabul, and the name of the month is Bul. And it happens to be that rabbinic tradition says that this is the month in which the flood of Noah happened. And the words, according to our rabbis of blessed memory, they say as follows: Bol shabo ala Naval. That in the month of Bul, when the produce wilts, which is the word Naval, it's related to the word Bul here again, that bet lamed word, bal. And the earth, وَهَأَرِّتْ أَسُيَّا bulot buloth, and the earth becomes these patches of mud, otherwise known in Hebrew as bulot buloth, وَيَرَ shebo Bolelin, and the month here, they mix Bolelin, which is fodder, l'behema b'toch habayith, they mix the fodder, the food for the animal, the Bolelin, inside the house, kilomar shemachal behema qala min hasadeh, because the field has come to an end, and that there's no more field for the animals to graze, and so all food is prepared in the house for the animal. So notice the multiplicity of meaning here. Radak refuses to settle on a single actual etymology. Instead, he offers us Mabul, which is flood, connecting it to the seasonal rains. Not only the seasonal rains, and as our tradition teaches, the timing of Noah's flood. He relates it to Naval, withering. The vegetation of the summer has faded away. To bulot, which are patches. The earth becomes muddy and irregular due to the rain. And Bolelin, mixing. Farmers now must feed animals from stored provisions rather than letting them graze in the pasture. Now, each interpretation reveals a facet of the month's character. This is a month of transition from outdoor to indoor, from abundance to conservation. From the active growing season to the dormant period, it's a month when the earth itself withdraws, when nature turns inward. And most significantly for us, according to tradition, the Great Flood, Mabul Noach, began on the 17th of Marheshwan. This month that seems so ordinary, so devoid of sacred marking, contains within it the memory of the world's near destruction. I should actually say the world's destruction and renewal. The connection to the Mabul isn't merely etymological. It shapes our entire understanding of what this month represents. Let's recall the chronology as the Torah presents it. בשנת 600 שנה לחי נוח, בחודש השני, ב17 יום לחודש. ביום הזה נקראו כל מעיינות תחום רבה, ורבות השמיים יפתחו. In the 600th year of Noach's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Now, according to the traditional reckoning, this second month refers to Marheshwan, which is the second month counting from Tishrei, which we have previously discussed as the human New Year, where humanity originally started reckoning months and years. So the second month from the human perspective is Marheshwan. Now, the flood waters prevailed for 40 days and began to recede after 150 days. And finally, on the 27th day of Marheshwan in the following year, Noah and his family emerged to a renewed earth. But why does this matter for us today? What does the Mabul teach us about the nature of this month? The flood represents both destruction and purification, both judgment and mercy. The Torah tells us explicitly all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth, and the land was filled with hamas, violence. When society becomes so degraded that violence and injustice reign, the very foundations of creation are undermined. Yet, even in destruction, God provides for preservation. The Teba, the ark, becomes a microcosm for the world that should be, where every creature is sustained, where there is no exploitation, where Noah's righteous stewardship ensures survival. It's interesting. Marheshwan, a month so associated in our collective unconscious with destruction, contains within it the seeds of renewal and rebuilding. After the intensity of Tishrei's festivals, after judgment and atonement, after dwelling in the Sukkah and celebrating with the Torah, we enter this quiet month carrying the question, how do we sustain holiness when the festivals end? How do we maintain righteousness in ordinary time? The Noah narrative provides an answer. Through faithfulness in the small acts, through consistent care, through building our own arks, our structures of daily practice, discipline, we can weather any storm. But Marheshwan holds another profound historical memory. The same verse that taught us the month's ancient name also records that in the month of Bul, the house was finished. What house are we talking about? That is Solomon's temple. 7 years in construction was completed on Marheshwan. Yet, and here's an interesting thing, it was not dedicated until the following Tishrei. We read later on the dedication process that happens during Tishrei, and that there's festivities that go on for 7 days and 7 days, and it even takes place during Yom HaKippurim. That some of the festivities happen on Yom Kippur that year, and it's not observed like it usually is. The sages ask why Solomon waited, and concludes that he wanted to dedicate the temple during the month of Tishrei, when divine mercy is abundant. The temple's completion in Marheshwan in this month devoid of festivals reminds us that the holy work doesn't require festive occasion. The actual labor of building, the dedication of craftsmen, the careful execution of the divine design, all this happens in the ordinary time. We may celebrate it in another set time, but everything that leads up to that celebration happens now. It's a pattern we see throughout Jewish life. The extraordinary emerges from the ordinary. The temple was built in Marheshwan but dedicated in Tishrei. The month itself seems to whisper to us that sacred work is sustained not by peak experiences, but by consistent effort, day after day, even with no festive celebration or marks on the calendar. There's another dimension to Marheshwan that connects to both the flood waters and the seasonal cycle. So this is when we truly begin praying for rain in the land of Israel. In the second blessing of the Amidah, we insert the phrase, Mashiv haruach umed hageshem. We start doing that with the Musaf of Shemini Atzeret. That is to say, that we, on the 8th day of Sukkot, we start praising God for giving dew and rain. Right? Mashiv haruach umed hageshem. But during Marheshwan, we actually start praying for rain proper. And it depends on, actually when we start, depends on where we live. In the land of Israel, we begin requesting rain on the 7th of Marheshwan. Outside of Israel, we wait until 60 days after what's called Tikufat Tishrei. Tikufat Tishrei is the autumnal equinox. This corresponds to November 21st. I will note that there are many people who say that it's December 4th or 5th, depending on the year. But it seems to me that 60 days after the autumnal equinox is November 21st. Now, the Rambam codifies in his Mishneh Torah, explaining that we begin mentioning rain on Shemini Atzeret by saying Mashiv haruach umed hageshem, but we don't begin requesting rain until these dates. Why? Why do we start praising God during Sukkot for sending us rain, but then actually start praying for rain after Sukkot has ended well into Marheshwan? The answer is that we want to give time in Israel for the last pilgrims from the festival to reach their homes without being delayed by rain. So if you start praying for rain, you should start expecting the rain. And if you start expecting the rain while if you're praying for rain while you're traveling, you're just asking for your travel to be delayed. And outside the land of Israel, we start praying for rain when the lands needed it. So in Babylon, it was a little bit more delayed. It wasn't until November that they started needing the rain, so they started praying for rain around that time, around 60 days after Tikufat Tishrei. Understanding the agricultural cycle helps us appreciate why we begin praying for rain precisely now. In the land of Israel, the rains that begin to fall as winter approaches are called yoreh. That's what we call, I guess in English you could call it the early rain, yoreh. These rains open the agricultural rain cycle. Throughout Marheshwan and Kislev and into the winter months, rainfall increases across Israel, reaching its peak in about January-February time. Then, as spring approaches in March, the rains begin to abate. The final heavy showers that fall at the end of March and into April are called, in Hebrew, malkosh, the latter rain. And these spring rains are critical, the last moisture before the long, dry Mediterranean summer. Both the yoreh and the malkosh are mentioned explicitly in the second paragraph of the Shema. והיה אם שמוע תשמעו למצוותי אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום להבא את ה' אלוהיכם לעבדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם ונתתי מדורתכם בעתו יורה ומלקוש ואספת דגניך ותירושך וישרך. So there it is. If you will earnestly obey my commandments, I'll give you the rain, your land in its season, which is your yoreh and malkosh, and you'll gather in your grain, your wine, your oil. When we begin requesting rain in Marheshwan, we are asking for the yoreh to arrive, for the seasonal cycle to begin properly, for the land to receive its life-giving waters at the right time. The Torah makes explicit what modern thinking often separates. The natural order and the moral order are inseparable. The rains come in their season, when we fulfill our obligations. Rain is both meteorological fact and covenantal response. This returns us to the dual nature of water in this month. Both the destructive waters of the Mabul and the life-giving rains Israel needs. Water, like time itself, is neither good nor evil. It's what we do with it, how we steward it, that matters. As we begin praying for rain, we're also praying for the wisdom to receive blessing appropriately, to use resources righteously, to avoid both the corruption that brought the flood and the drought that comes from spiritual lethargy. Before we turn to the mitzvot we should focus on this month, I want to highlight two often neglected blessings that connect directly to Marheshwan's themes. The blessing on seeing a rainbow and the blessing on seeing the new moon. Both blessings respond to natural phenomena. Both mark moments of renewal and covenant. And both are frequently either forgotten entirely or, in the case of the moon blessing, overlaid with so much ceremony that their original simplicity is obscured. So after seeing a rainbow, we recite the following beracha. And I'll say it like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zocher haberith ne'aman bivritho u'kayam b'ma'amaro. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who remembers the covenant, is faithful to his covenant, and fulfills his word. This blessing reflects the covenant God made with all humanity after the flood. As the Torah records in Genesis chapter 9, verse 13, את קשתי נתתי בענן והייתה לעוז ברית ביני ובין הארץ והיה ואני ענן על הארץ ברעתה קשת בענן וזכרתי את בריתי אשר ביני וביניכם ובין גונב ושחיה וכל בשר ולא יהיה עוד במים למבול לשחט כל בשר. I have set my bow in the clouds. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth, and I will remember my covenant. The Radak illuminates, or the text says, my rainbow, rather than simply the rainbow. The reason why God speaks of my rainbow instead of the rainbow is because he had now made it the visible reminder of the covenant between himself and humanity, just as he had said, Veni uven haaretz, between me and the earth. Or as the prophet Yehezkel refers, Kamara hakeshet, as the manifestation of the rainbow. The prophet considered the vision that he had seen in the first chapter of Yehezkel as comparable to the spectacle of the rainbow, something in which he stood in awe. The rainbow isn't merely a natural optical phenomenon. It has been designated as a covenantal sign. It belongs to the relationship between creator and creation. The Radak continues with a fascinating rabbinic interpretation from Bereshit Rabbah, which plays on the word kashti. It says, concerning this, the question is raised that the word kesht is related to the word mokesh li, a hidden obstacle for me, a stumbling block. So the question is, if the rainbow, as a reminder, is it supposed to serve as a warning for humanity to conduct themselves properly so that no deluge, no flood will be necessary? Or is he to look at it and think only of the promise that there will not be another flood? Just as now, after the rain, the sunlight appears in many different colors, something beautiful and certainly encouraging. So the Radak concludes that nowadays, the emphasis is only on the promise. We never experienced a deluge or a destruction like that. However, in the days of Noah, the sons of Noah, for whom when they saw the rainbow, it would strike terror into them, and they would be having memories of the horrible ordeal which they had survived and had been saved from. So, is the rainbow a warning or a promise? For Noah's generation, freshly emerged from the ark, every rainbow must have evoked terror before relief, a reminder of judgment before reassurance or of mercy. For us, generations removed, the rainbow speaks primarily of promise. In Marheshwan, the month of the flood's beginning, we see a rainbow after the seasonal rains, and we have an opportunity to recite this blessing with particular awareness. We acknowledge that the natural order itself might be read in a way that could uncover moral meaning, that weather patterns can speak of covenant, that we live under both promise and responsibility. The second blessing, recited upon seeing the new moon, has become elaborate in many communities, to put it lightly. But its essence is simple. You simply stand when you say this blessing. Unlike most other blessings, it doesn't matter whether you're standing or sitting, but this blessing we're supposed to stand for. And it's a few sentences. It goes as follows. Baruch ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'ma'amaro bara shehakim, uvaruach fi kol seva'am, hok uzeman nathan lehem shelo yish'anu et tafgidatham, sasim b'simchim la'asot ratzon konehem, bo'alei emeth, shepul'athan emeth, וללבנה אמר שיתחדש לראות עטרת תפארת לעמוסי בטן שהחן עתידין להתחדש כמותה ולפאר לרוצם על כבוד מלכותו. ברוך אתה אדוני מחדש חודשים. Blessed are you, Adonai, our sovereign, ruler of the universe, who by his word created the heavens, and by the breath of his mouth all of their hosts. He assigned them law and a time, so that they should not deviate from their task. They rejoice and are glad to perform the will of their Creator, workers of truth, whose work is truth. And to the moon he said that it should renew itself as a crown of glory for those born from the womb, who are destined to renew themselves like it, and to glorify their Creator for his glorious kingdom. Blessed are you, Adonai, who renews the months. This blessing may be recited from the first visibility of the new moon until the 16th of the month, when the moon becomes full. The only requirement is that one stands while reciting it. There's no jumping up 3 times, no wishing Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, no psalms that should be said before it, no elaborate ceremony. Just a person standing before the renewed moon, acknowledging the cycle that measures our sacred time. What does this blessing teach us? Several ideas. First, that the celestial bodies have tasks, tafkidatham, and they fulfill them reliably. The moon waxes and wanes with perfect regularity. It doesn't deviate. There's something we might learn from this type of consistency. Second, that these heavenly bodies are described as rejoicing and glad to perform the will of their Creator. The blessing attributes consciousness, even joy, to the natural order's obedience to its laws, whether this is literal or metaphorical. It suggests that there's something right, something harmonious about entities fulfilling their proper function. Third, and most beautifully, in my opinion, the blessing connects the moon's renewal to Israel's destiny. Those born from the womb, who are destined to renew themselves like it. We, the Jewish people, like the moon, wax and wane, diminish and return. The monthly cycle becomes a promise of perpetual renewal. In Marheshwan, a month defined by its name as the 8th month, a month measured by the lunar cycle, in the lunar calendar, this blessing takes on special significance. We are reminded that time itself is sanctified through these regular cycles, that renewal is built into the structure of creation. The tragedy is that simple, elegant blessing has become, in many communities, a mini-service, with jumping and swaying and various customs that obscure its essence and make it a burden to many people who decide not to do it. Return to the original practice. When you see the new moon, during the first half of the month, step outside, stand and recite this blessing. Make it a practice to go out on Rosh Chodesh even, and search for the new moon as it is its crescent, as it is beginning to renew itself. Let the awe of creation go over you and reflect on the beauty that is the natural world. Let the simplicity speak for itself. In keeping with our pattern, let's identify 2 specific mitzvot to focus on during Marheshwan. Practice that align with the month's unique character. The first mitzvah we'll focus on is tefillah. Now, after the fixed liturgy of the high holidays, after the special prayers of Sukkot, and the joyful celebrations, we return in Marheshwan to a daily rhythm of prayer. This is the perfect time to deepen our connection to prayer, our intention, our focus in what we are saying and why we're saying it. The Rambam in Hilchot Tefillah teaches the following. In the first chapter, in the first 2 halachot, he says, Mitzvah aseret ba'el b'chol yom, shene'amar, wa'avtem et Adonai Elohechem. It is an active commandment to pray every single day. As it says in the Torah, our source in the Torah is, you will serve the Lord your God. מפי השמוע, למדו שעבודה זו היא תפילה. Our oral tradition teaches us that this service, this avodah, this is tefillah. ונאמר, ולעבדו בכל לבבכם, you will serve him with all of your hearts. אמרו חכמים, זוהי עבודת שבלב, זוהי תפילה. So our sages ask, what is this serving with the heart, or the service of the heart? This is tefillah. ואין מניין התפילות מן התורה. There are no number of tefillot that are prescribed from the Torah. It just tells us to pray. It doesn't tell us how many times to pray. ולא משנה התפילה הזאת מן התורה. And there is no fixed time. ואין לתפילה זמן קבוע מן התורה. There's no fixed time for the prayers. It doesn't tell us that we have to pray specifically morning, evening, and afternoon. ולפיכך הנשים והעבדים חייבים בתפילה לפי שהיא מצווה עשה שלא הזמן הגרמה. Therefore, women are obligated in prayer because it is not a mitzvah that has time-bound. It's not a time-bound obligation. אלא חיוב מצווה זו. So what is the obligation? כך הוא שהיה אדם מתפלל ומתחנן בכל יום, that a person should mitpalel, to investigate, and to mitchanen, to pray, to request every single day. U'magid shebacho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to express praise of the Holy One, blessed be He. V'achar kach sho'al tzarachav shehu sarich lehen v'vaksha v'tchina, and after that to request his needs, to ask for what he needs through supplication. V'achar kach noten shevach v'hodaya l'Adonai, and afterwards to give praise and thanks to God Almighty. Ala tova shehishpi'a lo, to the good that He has given to him. Kol ehad kefi kocho, every single person according to their ability. If he continues here, it says, Im haragil marbe b'techina b'v'ksha, and if he is ragil, meaning he or she is able to have their words flow, they are very fluent in how they speak and are creative in composition, they increase everything they do. However, if they are of, as it says as Moses says, of uncircumcised lips, it's hard for them to speak. They should speak when they need, at the time they need. They shouldn't burden themselves to do this constantly. And likewise with the number of the prayers. Everyone should do according to what they can, what they're capable of. There are those who would pray once a day. And there are those who prayed many times a day. Wherever you are, you pray facing the Mikdash. And this was the way prayer was done from Moses until Ezra. So there was no fixed formula. There was no number of prayers we said. We prayed with our hearts. We prayed with what was in our lips from Moses until Ezra. Now, interestingly enough, Elias ben Hamozeg and his Em Lamikra, actually concerning the verse we recited earlier about the yoreh u'malkosh, he says that it applies to prayer. This verse is applying to the sincerity of our prayer, and that from here he uses a verse in Isaiah that proves to him that we used to always have some sort of formulated prayer that we would say, because in Isaiah it mentions that our lips and our mouth being there but our heart being distant. And why would our lips and our heart be there, our lips be there but our heart not be there, unless we were reciting some sort of formula? So in any event, though, the formula prayer that we have today wasn't actually stamped until the times of Ezra. That came much later on with the men of the Great Assembly who Ezra led. So what can we learn from these halachot? We learn from these halachot that the essence of prayer, the essence of tefillah, is communion with our Creator. To take time daily to engage in that communion is to fulfill the mitzvah of serving God with our heart. To feel something in our souls, in our minds, an internalization of the actions we perform. In Marheshwan, when we're not distracted by festival preparations or special observances, we can work on making our daily prayers genuine, not merely recited, truly prayed. This month, consider maybe praying with a minyan and praying at home. Make this practice personal as well as communal. You don't have to pray in a minyan every day, but you should strive to pray every day. Studying the meaning of one paragraph of the Amidah each week can also bring the prayer home. You will come to see that the words will become more personal and meaningful if you understood what that paragraph is talking about. Take a moment before the Amidah to center yourself in God's presence. Remember before whom you stand. And add your own tefillos, add your own desires, worries, hopes, fears to the language of the tefillah. The Rambam emphasizes in Hilchot Tefillah also that prayer requires our intention and presence of mind. It's called in Hebrew kavanah or kavanat halev. He says as follows in Halakha 15 of the 4th chapter, Kawanat halev kesad. What does it mean to have focus, to have intention? Kol tefillah she'ena b'chavana ena tefillah. Any prayer that you say without chavana is not a tefillah. It doesn't just mean intention, like I'm focused on the prayer, but with the intention of being a prayer. I can say words, but if I'm not meaning them in a prayerful way, that does not count for prayer. Now, normally, mitzvot eno siricha kavana, the prayers don't not, mitzvot generally don't need kavana, but our tefillot do require kavana because they are about our internal process. And if someone prays without the intention of it being a prayer, they need to go back and they need to actually pray. They didn't pray before. So what happens then if someone finds that their thought process is all mishubeshet? How do you say that in English? You're unfocused, you're unsettled, your heart is troubled. So there's the point that you can't focus on the prayer. Everything you're doing is on autopilot because you're focused on everything else. Asur lo lehitpalel. It's not just recommended to not pray. It is forbidden to pray. Asur lo lehitpalel. He should not. It is forbidden to pray. Ad shitashev da'ato, until they can settle their mind. Leficha haba min haderech. Therefore, someone who is just coming in from the road, meaning they've been traveling, hu ayef, and he's tired, or miser, or bothered. Asur lo lehitpalel, is forbidden for them to pray. Ad shitashev da'ato, until they settle their mind. Amru hachamim, and our sages give a little bit of like a parameter for this. How long is that? So for the person who's traveling, shelosha yamim, 3 days. It takes 3 days for them to settle themselves back into from the road. Ad shanuch v'tikar da'ato v'achar kach yitpalel, and that's when they can start to pray again after that time period has passed. So what is kavanah? It says as follows: you turn your heart away from your thoughts. And you see yourself as though you are standing in front of the presence of God. Therefore, a person must sit a little before the tefillah in order to focus their heart. And then they pray. But nahat ub'tahanunim. Nahat is steady, paced, thoughtfully, not rushed. You don't bang out a minha. You pray it. And a person should not place down their prayer as a person carrying a burden places down their burden, and then sends themselves away from it. And the person needs to sit a little bit after the tefillah. And afterwards they can depart. The tefillah here is talking about our amidah. We've built this into the service. I think that the point of saying Tishrei before minha, for example, is to help us settle. I don't think it helps you settle if you say Ashrei like Ashrei. If you say it with a ta'amim and you slow yourself down and you say each line out loud and go Ashrei, you go Tehillah le David aro mimcha Eloi melech va'avarecha shimcha le'olam wa'ed, and you go at that pace, I think it does slow you down for sure. Helps you to focus on what it is you're doing. Hasidim harishonim hayu shohin sha'a kodem tefillah. It used to be that the original Hasidim, they would sit for an hour. I don't think it's an hour literally. It's just a time before the tefillah. Washa ahar tefillah, and for some time after the tefillah. Umarechin b'tefillah sha'at, and that they would increase their tefillah because of it. They would increase their tefillah an hour because of it. Marheshwan invites us to animate our prayers with genuine presence. Perhaps it's a time to focus on what's important in the prayer, rather than all the additions we've added to it. But perhaps that's a conversation for another time. The second mitzvah we should study on, or focus on, is limud Torah, the study of Torah. Not just the study of Torah, the daily study of Torah. This is the month to establish or to strengthen our daily Torah study practice. And I think that's so because we are restarting the Torah. If you're doing the Tanakh Yomi, Nach Yomi, we're restarting the prophets and the writings. And we'll get into that cycle. So finding ourselves in a new study cycle can help us strengthen our resolve to study. Harambam writes in Hilchot Talmud Torah the following halacha. He says in halacha, chapter 1, halacha 8 or 11, depending on your girsa. Kol ish miYisrael hayav b'Talmud Torah ben ani ben ashir. בין שלם גופו, בין בעלי ייסורין, בין בחור, בין שהיה זקן גדול שתשש כוחו. אפילו אני המחזר על הפתחים, ואפילו בעל אישה ובנים, חייב לקבוע לו זמן לתלמוד תורה ביום ובלילה, שנאמר, והגית בו יומם ולילה. Every person in Israel is obligated in the study of Torah, whether they are poor or they are rich, whether they are healthy and they are of good fortune or they are not, whether they are single and young or whether they are old and are losing their strength, whether they are a type of person who has to make their living going door to door, whether they have a family and children or they don't. Hayav likbo'a lo zaman letalmud Torah. They are obligated to establish in a set time, a regular set time, for the study of Torah, day and night. Shene'amar, as it says, you will meditate on it day and night. He continues in the next halachot, in 13 through 12, or 11 through 12, depending on how you count. Until when is a person obligated to study the Torah? Until when? Maybe there's a cutoff date. Ad yom moto, until the day they die. As it says, lest you turn your heart away from me all the days of your life. Because every time, the upshot is, every time a person ceases to study, they turn away from study, they start to forget. And this is the meat of it right here, the meat of what I want to focus on. A person is obligated to divide their study into thirds. Shalish b'Torah shebichtav. A third of it should be in Torah shebichtav. So that is the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketubim, the Tanakh, the Mikra. Ushalish b'Torah sheba'al peh. A third should be in the Torah sheba'al peh. What is that? Well, that's Mishnah, Halacha, Gemara. ושליש יבין וישכיל חרית דבר מראשיתו ויוציא דבר מדבר ודמה דבר לדבר וידין במידות שתורה נדרשת בהן עד שידע איך הוא עיקר המידות איך יוצא אסור מותר וכיוצא בהן מדברים שלמד מפי השמוע ועניין זה הוא הנקרא תלמוד. And then a third of it should be spent in this sort of understanding the end of a matter from its beginning, understanding how things develop, and being able to derive one thing from another, and to compare and contrast separate subjects, and to adjudicate based off of the 13 hermeneutical principles of the Torah, and to understand the crux of a matter and each principle and therefore becoming to see how and why things are forbidden or permitted, or similarly, or how we have derived things from our oral tradition and how our oral tradition works. And this matter is called Talmud. Notice before I said that the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which was one of the things that it should be studied, was Mishnah and Gemara. And then here we're saying that this is Talmud. Talmud, studying Gemara isn't necessarily engaging in Talmud. It's not even engaging necessarily in Talmud Torah if you're doing it incorrectly, in my opinion. But Talmud is the broad study of things. And Ketzad Hayab Alamun Umanot, and he gives a little schedule of what this looks like. So you have a person who works, they are Bal Umanut, they are a craftsman of sorts. And of course, this is a regular schedule that everyone is familiar with and everyone can relate to. It goes as follows. You work your 3 hours a day. You're a solid 3, as they say here. And then because you have 9 free hours now, you study the rest of that daytime, light time hours. 9 hours is the study of Torah. So, Otan Tesha, so in that sense you have 9 hours, you're going to divide into thirds. 3 of those hours are going to be dedicated to studying the written Torah. That's the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketubim. And then a third of it will be studying Mishnah and Gemara and Halachos. And the third will be the study will be Talmud. ודברי קבלה, בכל תורה שבכתב הן, ופירושן, ובכלל תורה שבעל פה, ועניינו נקראים פרדס בכלל התלמוד. And we have a tradition that pardon me, actually, it should read more like this. ודברי קבלה. What is Divrei Kabbalah? Divrei Kabbalah are the words of the prophets. The words of the prophets. And that's included in Torah Shebechtav, right? And included in that are the Ketubim, because the Ketubim are mostly written by the prophets. So they're included in the written Torah. Okay, that's Torah Shebechtav. And the explanation, that's included in Torah Sheba'al Peh. So that's studying the Ankylos, or the Targum. Studying the Targum is studying the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the example he gives here of Talmud, the matters that we designate Pardes, that's included in Talmud. You could call the things Pardes, that are things like not to be confused with the oft quoted Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod, not that. But Pardes here is the Ma'aseh Merkabah and Ma'aseh Bereshit. And these are things that are sort of hidden in Jewish tradition and need a little bit more explanation on their own. But they're not engaging with a text per se. There's something else going on there that a person has a very deep intellectual investigation. Now, in Marheshwan, without the interruptions of festivals, we can build the framework of regular study again. This might mean setting a fixed time each day, even if it's only 15, 30 minutes, 9 hours, whatever you can do. Choosing a text to work through systematically. Al ha-seder, as we say. It doesn't have to be fancy. It does not have to be Gemara. In fact, I would not recommend it be Gemara unless you are able to parse Babylonian Aramaic very well. But maybe start with biblical reading, understanding the Mikra, understanding the 24 books of the Tanakh, studying Mishnayot, studying Halakha, studying Harambam, which is very accessible. It should also include finding a study partner. If you can, it could help sharpen you, sharpen each other, and hold each other responsible. And there are those who really enjoy programs like Daf Yomi, Mishnah Yomit, or daily Rambam cycles. I don't always recommend them. But if it's something that you get something from, it's a good program for you to follow then. I would like to present the following text, which is in Ladino, from the Ferrara Bible. It's a Ladino translation of Los 24, the 24 books of the Mikra. It's printed near the beginning as a sort of instruction manual to study. And I do ask for a little bit of grace because it's one of these old printings where letters don't always look what they look like. The S's look like F's sometimes, so if I will mess up here and there. But here is how it says: Repartición de la Biblia a saber, the division of the Bible. Namely, los profetas escritos, repridados y 54 partes como el número de las parshot. The prophets and the writings divided into 54 parts, which correspond to the number of the weekly Torah portions. Para leer con cada una semana por semana, they should be read with each one week by week. Lo que corresponde de los profetas escritos y allí leer toda la Biblia en un año. And because you're reading them week by week, and you're reading a corresponding reading from the prophets and a corresponding reading from the writings, you'll read the entire Bible in 1 year. Gozando cada día de las tres, and each day you will enjoy las tres lecciones importantísimas, the 3 important lessons or 3 important readings. And that, namely, la ley, profetas y escritos con que vendrá a meditar en la ley perfectamente, which are the law, which is the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. In this way, one will come to meditate on the law perfectly, I guess. There is then a little grid here. It's a chart that lays out the parashiot in the principio, Noach, Idisho Avram, etc., etc. It names the parashiot in English. And then, for example, here is what is paired with Parashat Noach. So with Parashat Noach, it's Yoshua, capítulo 8, hasta 13. So it's chapter 8 through 13. You read chapter 8 through 13 of Joshua. And then, from Los Salmos, you read chapter 18 to 28. So just that week. On that Saturday or whatever it is, you read those sections from the prophets and the Haftarah. Now, he continues, after he gives this chart, by saying, todo el varón que voluntarse su corazón, every person whose heart moves them voluntarily, para llegarse a la hora del Señor, para hacer a ella, to approach the work of the Lord and to do it, puede tener cierta repetición en su Biblia. They may mark divisions in their Bible. En el principio de cada lección, at the beginning of each lesson, para ser más fácil cada semana y aún por una curiosidad, como hicieron algunos el partele eses menores para los 6 días de la semana. To make it easier each week, and even for people who have more curiosity, to divide them into 6 smaller portions for the 6 days of the week, right? Meldando cada hora su parte en su saliendo de tefilá antes de hacer obra alguna, and then to read each part as they finish the prayers. They are leaving tefillah before doing any work. And this is the important part. Como cosa situada y firme, as something that is, as a discipline, something established and firm. Pues este es el verdadero y más vale una hora de ley
efectuada que sea continua de cada día en un misma hora que muchas por accidente y acaso, porque el dedicación de aquel tiempo muestra una muy grande y firme memoria de la ley. And this leads to a true reading, or the true way of reading. And 1 hour of established law, established learning, that continues each day at the same hour is worth more than many readings done accidentally and by chance, because of the dedication of that time shows a very great desire for a firm memory of the law. Y que de ella ese fundamento que es lo que estima el Señor. And from what he makes, and from that, he makes a foundation. And that's what the Lord esteems. Y se advierte que cuando por alguna ocasión, and it should be and it should be noted that when he has some sort of forceful occasion, right? No puede la mañana hacer su obligación, no puede cumplir la noche siguiente, that he's not able to fulfill his obligation that morning of reading, of studying. He can fulfill his obligation the following night. Siguiendo por el día pasado, that serves for the previous passing day. Porque en esto del mirar la noche, siga el día antecedente, because in this manner of reading, the night follows the preceding day. Es la noche el verdadero y propio tiempo del cantico de la ley, y nuestros maestros lo encarecen muy mucho. And the night is the true and proper time for the singing of the law. I like that. It's very beautiful wording here. Cantico de la ley, the singing of the law. And nuestros maestros, our sages, greatly praise and commend that study. Y por bien y salvación de las familias y casa, que no se pase noche, que no se oiga voz de la ley en casa. And it is for the good and the salvation of the families and the houses that no night should pass without the voice of the law being heard in the house. Y dicen que todo el que medita de noche el Señor le adorna el día siguiente con un señal y hilo de misericordia. Y es el fruto natural del árbol de vida, que la de a quien se pega con el Creador Dios. And they say that whoever meditates on the law at night, that the Lord adorns him the next day with a sign and thread of mercy. And it is the natural fruit of the tree of life that gives itself to whoever clings to it. As it says in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 35, porque el que me halló ayuda y saco de a Dios. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from God. Whatever you manage, so turning to outside of the translation, whatever you manage to study this year, we can see here that the key is consistency rather than quantity. It's better to study a small amount daily than to attempt heroic study sessions sporadically. As our sages teach us, Talmud, Torah, Haneged Kulan, the Torah study corresponds to all the mitzvot. For it is through the study of the Torah that we deepen our relationship with our past, make our present meaningful, and connect with the Borei Olam. Which brings us to the heart of Marheshwan's wisdom. How do we maintain spiritual consciousness when no festival demands it of us? I would say it's actually relatively easy to feel connected during Yom Kippur or while sitting in the sukkah. The challenge is feeling that some connection on the 17th of Marheshwan, or in the middle of the work week, when nothing external signals holiness. Harambam dresses in Hilchot De'oth, where he describes the path of serving God in all aspects of life, where he says as follows: Nimsa mehalech derech zu kol yama kulo. עובד את אדוני תמיד, אפילו בשעה שנושא ונותן, ואפילו בשעה שבועל, מפני שמחשבתו בכל, כדי שימצא צרכיו עד שיהיה גופו שלם לעבוד את אדוני. ואפילו בשעה שהוא ישן, אם ישן לדעת כדי שתנוח דעתו עליו, וינוח גופו כדי שלא יחלה, ולא יוכל לעבוד את אדוני והוא חולה, נמצאת שינה שלו עבודה למקום ברוך הוא. ועל עניין זה סברו חכמים ואמרו כל מעשיך יהיו לשם שמיים. והוא שנאמר שלמה וחוכמתו בכל דרכיך ידעו. That one should behave in a manner that is constantly seeking to bring holiness into the mundane. And this is how one serves God constantly. Even when you're doing your business dealings. Even when engaging in your marital relations. Even eating and drinking, because in all those things, one's intention is to have their body serve God. Even when one sleeps, if one sleeps to rest one's mind and body so as not to become sick, one sleep becomes a service of the divine. This is the Maimonidean vision, not a spirituality of escape from the world, but a spirituality of elevation within the world. Every act, even the most mundane, can become an act of perfection when performed with a proper intention. This understanding of finding God in ordinary time reflects core insights from our tradition. The Rambam's entire project in the Guide for the Perplexed aims at showing how rational understanding and traditional practice converge, how the mitzvot aren't arbitrary impositions, but pathways to human perfection. It's a vision that allows no separation between a religious life and an ordinary life, the compartmentalizing of our days. There's just life. All of life is a beautiful service of the divine. And this is the core of rabbinic mysticism. It's integration. It's the refusal to compartmentalize existence into sacred and profane spheres. Marheshwan, empty of festivals, challenges us to live this integrated life, to make our workdays as purposeful as our holidays, our ordinary moments as conscious as our peak experiences. As we conclude this exploration of Marheshwan, I want to return to Noah and his ark. The ark wasn't built during a dramatic moment. It was constructed slowly, steadily, over years, while others mocked, while society continued its corruption, while nothing external validated the effort. Noah's ark is a metaphor for our spiritual practice in ordinary time. We build our arks, our frameworks of daily mitzvot, our structures of study and prayer, our habits of kindness and integrity, day by day, in the quiet middle of our months and years. We build them not because festivals demand it, not because external circumstances force it, but because we understand that these practices sustain us. When the waters come, and they will come, in the form of crisis, loss, confusion, challenge, these arcs preserve us. The person who finds meaning only during festivals has no ark when ordinary life becomes turbulent. But the person who has built a practice in discipline throughout Marheshwan and the rest of their days, who has learned to pray with intention, who has established daily Torah study, who treats each mundane interaction as an opportunity for goodness, that person has built something that can weather any storm. Marheshwan teaches us that spiritual life isn't meant to be spectacular. It's meant to be sustained. The holiest moments often come disguised as the most ordinary ones. Whether it's seeing a rainbow or watching the moon be renewed, the most sacred work is frequently the most repetitive and unglamorous too. As we move through this month, I invite you to ask yourself, what am I building? What daily practices sustain me? How am I finding God in the ordinary? Perhaps this year, instead of calling Marheshwan the bitter month or the empty month, we might reclaim its true name and understanding, as is the 8th month of gathering before the winter, the month that completes the cycle, the month that reveals whether our festival experiences have truly transformed us or were merely temporary emotional highs. May this Marheshwan be for all of us a month of building our daily practice, building our commitment to learning, building our capacity to find holiness in every moment, not just the ones marked by tradition as special. Until next month, when we'll explore Kislev or Kislev, the month that brings light into winter's darkness. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember, every day offers the opportunity to serve God, to study Torah, and to walk righteously. No festival required. Shalom uvracha al vermos. Until next time.